Welcome to episode 36 of Last Turn. I'm Bart, and I'm joined by Evan today. How are you doing?
That is a good question. It's kind of a mixed bag. If I were to pick two words to describe how I'm feeling, one would be excited, but another would be concerned.
Oh, that's wild. Tell me why you're concerned.
Well, they're my poor baby, my quest, my favorite quest. They're hurting it again. It's already been abused once by its creator, and now they're weakening the Caverns Below again for the second time. And I love that card. That's how I would have never had Golden Valir. I didn't touch Rogue at all. And then the Caverns Below came out, and I played that a lot. And now and then they nerfed it. And I said goodbye to it for a bit. We parted. I dusted it. I'm being upfront here. But then I took it back because it was, I missed it. And now, they're just giving the old shaft yet again. And I'm not even sad because it's kind of like, oh well, this card is really powerful. But I don't even know if it's really gonna die. The nerf is going to make it, instead of giving you 5/5s, they're going to be 4/4s. But that still could be really powerful. I'm concerned.
So, yeah, I actually, it's funny that you mentioned that. I think that in our extremely, well-timed balance changes speculation episode, we talked a little bit about how we didn't think that this card necessarily needed a nerf, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, or at least, if we didn't talk about it extensively, that was, I think, our opinion. But I kind of felt like that going in, and I figured, okay, if they're going to change this card at all, they should do it in a way where they either completely rework it, which is going to be very difficult, given that they've already printed cards to support it, or they just outright kill the card completely. Because I think that, the 5-card thing made it pretty fair. It made it tough to trigger. It was an automatic guaranteed thing. It really screwed up your game against aggro. But the deck was still around in this metagame, and I think what that showed us is that in a format where Quest Rogue can exist at all, people don't like it, and it's a problem.
Yeah.
So
it definitely causes the same problem every time.
Yeah, it's not that or it was too powerful. I think that, post nerf, cause it's not just they made it 5 and Gash's Auctioneer rotated. Not Auctioneer, Ferryman. So it's harder to trigger now. And, I guess you have Sonya and stuff, but still, it's that the type of effect offered by the Crystal Core is just a little bit too, it's not what, they want in Hearthstone. It causes too many balance problems and too much, metagame related issues. So it's weird to me that they opted for just another notch down as opposed to just making it so you need to play 10 minions or something.
Yeah. There's actually an article on Hearthstone that pros react to the changes, and there's some pros that are basically this doesn't seem like they did enough. Because the reason I think it probably does deserve the nerf, even though I don't want it to see weaker, is because they're weakening all these other powerful cards.
Yeah.
So all these other powerful decks are going to become weaker. Obviously, Quest Rogue would become relatively stronger, so it makes sense to weaken that as well. But they might have actually missed their opportunity to slay the beast that they should have taken. But taking 20% of the power off of your guys is pretty big.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. 20% nerf is a pretty huge one, but 4/4 charges can win the game pretty easily.
This is true.
So it's not, it might take them a turn or two longer to do it, and once they start making big minions, they're not going to be nearly as terrifying, because I think 4 is you can access 4 power a lot more easily than you can access 5 power, to sort of do good trading, but the deck may still function in the same way. Maybe not. I guess we'll have to see, but it would be a huge shame if it was still viable, because then I don't think they would have solved whatever potential problems there were at all.
Yeah, that's possibly the more legitimate reason I should be concerned. is if you think about the decks that aren't getting nerfed, it's like Shudderwalk and Control Warrior and Taunt Druid. All of these decks that just get rolled by Crystal Core, even if it makes your minions 4/4s.
Yeah, it's I mean, yeah, I guess I feel similarly. Like it's just it's they're leaving intact a bunch of control decks, and they're nerfing a bunch of pretty strong cards from proactive decks like Spiteful Summoner and Call to Arms. So like they're weakening proactive strategies. They're trying to encourage slower strategies. And I guess, in that context, nerfing Crystal Core makes sense. It's just how much do they want to nerf it? Because, like, the part that's strange to me, I mean, I guess, like, premise 0, maybe I should have stated it outright if I didn't, is that I don't think it was a problem in its current state. I don't think Quest Rogue was an oppressively powerful deck or even, like, a top metagame contender. But it was a viable deck, and it was enough to cause problems. So,
yeah,
like, the fact that they would just notch it down and, like, leave open the possibility that it becomes a viable deck is strange. Then again, I guess, like, there are people like you who really like play it and will play it no matter what. And in that case, you don't want to, like, screw up somebody's collection that badly. But
I mean, I think cards like Crystal Core existing is really fun. Maybe a better nerf would be, for the rest of the game, your minions are 5/5 with no abilities.
Oh, yeah, that's really interesting.
Because then they couldn't charge and stuff, yeah.
Yeah. That's curious. Yeah, it's just vanilla 5/5s, or like you could do something like one way you could template that would be like, for the rest of the game, your minions are like, monsters, and then a monster is just a 5/5.
Yeah, that's our 5/5. Yeah, monsters or oozes. It would be lame if they went with oozes because they always go with ooze, but. I guess a 5/5 ooze would probably have pretty cool art. But yeah, right. That would totally, the moment the minion comes into play, it would be replaced with something that's vanilla. That could have been a pretty cool, I mean, I hope they don't do that, because that would really suck.
Yeah. I mean, then, yeah, that's interesting.
That would be more thorough, for sure.
But, there were some other balance changes as well that we at least mentioned. Like, I think the one that I saw coming the least was Dark Pact.
Yeah, because so Dark Pact, as we're speaking, is 1 mana to kill one of your minions for 8 health, and they're going to convert it to only giving you 4 health. And I kind of thought they were going to affect the cost of it instead.
Yeah, I thought so too, because like you can still, do cube shenanigans on curve a little bit, like off of Skull of Minari with Dark Pact. Then again, they did nerf Possessed Lackey, which in a way is like a cost nerf to Dark Pact.
Yep, that's true, and I'm really happy about that change.
Yeah, I think that, in Dark Pact, they just reduced the health that it gave you. Possessed Lackey now costs 1 more, so it used to cost 5, now it costs 6. I agree with that. I actually think that change makes a whole lot of sense. Possessed Lackey was so much stronger than it looked. And just because, Doomguards and Void Lords will win the game in their matchups, and they're pretty much both good in any matchup.
Yeah, and you know what? You mentioned this during our review of kobolds, and we were looking at recruit and how the more restrictive the recruit effect, the better it is, essentially.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah,
that was basically the conclusion we came to, and one of the most picky cards with recruit is Call to Arms, and it's the best one.
Right.
And then things like Gather Your Party very rarely see any play because they get all of, the restriction lets you continue to play things like Acidic Swamp Ooze, but still hit Void Lord every time on your Lackey. That's why Lackey was so good. It's recruit effect only for demons. That narrowness is really strong.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you. I think that it's pretty much exactly what you said. The more narrow you make the recruit, the less you actually have to screw up your deck to make the recruit card work. And as long as you have 1 or 2 good targets from that kind of recruit effect, then it's enough to make the deck function. And Possessed Lackey is this the case in point there. It's Gather Your Party, it costs so much. It's so expensive because it can recruit anything. Which means that it can recruit, just 10/10 horrible beasts that are, that they hit the board and then they just cause major problems to your opponent. So, that means that you need to balance the card around it being able to pull out a 10/10, because if the card just said something like recruit a 10 costed minion, it would actually just be better.
Right, way better.
It would have to cost even more. But, it currently costs 6 because it can recruit a 10/10, but it can also recruit anything else in your deck, meaning that, like, if you want it to reliably pull out something, you can't put those things in.
Yeah, and so if Possessed Lackey's recruit is going to be better than Gather Your Party, it's kind of crazy that Gather Your Party would cost more.
That is true. I actually never even considered the cards, but that's pretty funny.
I was just thinking about it, like, why does 6 cost Lackey just sound so appropriate? It's like, oh, there's that other recruit at 6 mana.
So it's kind of weird though. Like, it's not it's not a strict 1-to-1 comparison because Gather Your Party happens immediately, whereas Possessed Lackey only happens when it dies.
Yeah.
So it does give, it's like, it's pretty much just going to happen the next turn, but so it is actually somewhat slow, but it does give your opponent time to counterplay with things like Silence or Polymorph if they have those effects.
Yeah, no, it's certainly not that simple, but still.
Yeah, of course. So I think some of the other nerfs, there's the Naga Sea Witch nerf. I think that one just makes sense. People really hated 5-mana Naga Sea Witch, even if, like, the Giants deck wasn't a top-tier deck.
It certainly wasn't, like, fun or... It didn't feel very Hearthstone-y.
Yeah, it wasn't. It was, it definitely didn't. It didn't encourage, like... I don't think it encouraged a kind of gameplay that people really like to play against, or even... I mean, some people like to play with it because it wins really easily, but it's not particularly fun. It kind of it had, like, an identical sequence of turns for the first 5 turns as, like, Q-Block, but instead of playing a Possessed Lackey on 5, it would just play, like, Naga Sea Witch and a bunch of 8/8s, and that's just not... most decks can't deal with that at that point in the game.
Yeah, Q-Block at least has some intricacy and elegance to it, and, like, there's tricky, neat things you can do with Umbra and stuff, and with the Giants deck, you just play 8/8s and win.
Yeah, it's not... Yeah, this was just... Weakening that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Spiteful Summoner was an interesting nerf. They made it cost 1 more. The card still seems like it's good to me.
Yeah, I mean, it's now, like, playing other cards that cost 6 is a bit more appealing, and now you got another 7-drop along with Malfurion.
Yeah.
It could definitely still be really strong, in either Druid or Priest, but it's at least going to be less brutal against, I think the control decks are the ones that really suffer against that, because if they happen to hit the untargetable one, then you're just kind of screwed. If your gameplay is to have answers to their problems rather than just try and kill them, something like High Rolls and Spiteful Summoner are a lot more unpleasant, so I think that will help control decks and stuff, which is what I like. I'm excited to play some Taunt Druid.
Oh yeah, I actually was, I had a Druid quest, and I was yesterday I had Druid Quest, and I actually tried playing Spiteful for a bit, and that deck really doesn't have any Druid class cards in it. But I realized this because after, like, 2 games I'd played, like, 5.
Yeah, it's like all neutrals.
Yeah, I didn't realize that until, that happened. But then I actually played some Taunt Druid. That deck has a lot of class cards in it, and
yeah,
did really well. I had a pretty big win streak into the, like, several stars in rank 4. Very nice.
Nice, yeah, it's a strong deck. It's got similar qualities to Control Warrior in that you have a lot of tools for just preventing an aggro deck from winning by having a ton of armor and taunt minions, and then you also have the, like, unbeatable endgame against control decks.
Yeah, and a lot of the kind of hate that targets the deck isn't that prevalent in the metagame right now. So, its strategy can actually sort of flourish, because people aren't really running Skulking Dice very much. It's not absent, but it's just not very common. And same thing with Polymorph. There's, like, one deck that runs Polymorph right now, and it's not a terribly common deck.
Yeah, Mage definitely, the popular Mage deck is an aggro deck that is not playing Polymorph, and then also Shaman is not that common, so you won't see that many hexes.
Yeah. And so I guess, the last nerf we have here is Call to Arms. This nerf makes sense. This card was too good.
Yeah, we basically covered why this is too good right just now. At 4 mana. It would I would still play it in like combo decks at 6 mana.
Yeah, I was thinking the same thing. Like, I think if this costed 6, you'd still be getting a deal. Like, it might, it wouldn't see as wide play, like, because it would, a deck that has like its key card at 6 mana but is filled with 2 drops is a kind of funky deck. But, like you said, in a deck where you're pulling out Doomsayers or, combo pieces, Doomsayers, Wild Pyromancers, Loot Hoarders, it makes sense at 6 mana.
Weasel Tunnelers.
Yeah, if that's your thing. If your thing is Weasel Tunnelers.
You have Umbra out, and then you call the arms and hit your Weasel Tunnelers.
Yeah, but at 5 it's nice. It's still those kinds of decks that are pulling out those derpy minions are happy to play this at 5, but an aggressive deck, a proactive deck, is also still pretty happy to play it at 5.
Yep, there's not really, like, all the 5 drops were, like, conditional, like, Level Up or Fungalmancer for the most part in the Paladin deck, so this is, like, something proactive to do with 5 mana, so it's definitely gonna, like, I think there's gonna be Murlocs that uses this, and then maybe, just a Dude Paladin that isn't even or odd. Making this 5 mana thoroughly hoses both the even and odd strategies, because now neither can use it effectively.
Yeah, that's interesting. That's something, I guess, even and odd is something we can get to later in the episode, but I definitely agree that this takes it out of the even deck, which probably just, puts a bullet in that deck.
And that was one of the main appeals of playing even instead of odd, is you got Call to Arms and
2 costs. Gone. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm glad that Paladin's getting weaker, because that was usually, I'm playing like Quest Rogue and stuff. I'm not usually happy to see a Paladin on the other side, so I'm glad.
Yeah, it's just too good.
Little taste of the shaft as well.
Yeah, we mentioned last episode, like, cards like Call to Arms, recruit effects in general just get stronger as they cause design space problems. If they ever printed like another good 2-drop, it just makes the deck better.
Yeah, even in neutral.
Yep. I actually ran into an even Paladin playing Pint-Sized Summoner the other day.
That is adorable.
It was.
Oh, that's clever.
Yeah, so it was I was kind of like, it occurred to me like, okay, that's actually probably not better than, like any, like Amani Berserker or Plated Beetle. Like, it's probably just worse than those cards, but
yeah,
that doesn't matter, really. Like, it almost, because the Call to Arms effect in the rest of the deck is just so strong, it doesn't even really matter if you're pulling out a 2/2 or a 2/3 off of it.
That's adorable, though.
Yeah, it was pretty funny. So this episode, do you want to get into our main topic?
Sure. Let's talk mechanics, and I don't mean your dad.
He. So, this episode we wanted to talk a little bit about some of the mechanics in Witchwood. So there are several, and some of them have been a little bit more impactful than others, and we wanted to talk about maybe why that is.
Yeah, well, Bart, what is a mechanic?
So, I think a mechanic in general is like a repeated theme that occurs on cards, or I guess just, more generally, it's just the way that something works in a game. But when we say mechanic, we mean a type of effect that's present on multiple cards.
Yeah.
Charge is an example of a fan favorite mechanic, where any minion that has charge can attack the turn it comes out. There are some mechanics that are keyworded, like charge, but then some that are not keyworded. They don't have like a specific word that communicates exactly what they do. Their sort of full effect is written out. Like, for example, the werewolves in Witchwood that whose attack and health are swapped, each turn when they're in your hand.
Yeah, that's an effect that appears on multiple cards, so it counts as a mechanic.
Yes, exactly. Or hand buffing is another one such mechanic. There's many examples in Hearthstone of non-keyworded mechanics.
Yeah, they're all over the place.
And actually something even a little bit more abstract, like tribal support, which would group cards like Mech Warper and Gentle Megasaur. Yeah, that's the 4-mana guy, right? That's what he's called?
Yeah, 4-mana 5/4.
Yeah. So those two cards both are sort of tribal, and tribalism is a mechanic. So they would fall in the same sort of category.
And the Witchwood introduced 2 keyworded mechanics, Rush and Echo. And then we also mentioned that there's the werewolves that switch health and attack in your hand, and there's the even odd mechanic, which is, these are all completely new in the Witchwood.
Yes, yeah, these are all sort of new themes that appear on multiple cards, or support exists for these cards. or they just, they impact Hearthstone in significant enough way to call them a repeated theme. So we wanted to talk a little bit about what the impact of these mechanics are, which I think will be an interesting discussion. Right off the top, I want to say that I was very wrong about Rush.
Yeah, if you listen to our review of this set, you'll hear us be excited for Warrior getting all of these cool Rush cards, and then here we are.
Yeah, so I noticed one thing I said, I forgot which card it was, but it was some cheap card in Knights of the Frozen Throne. I said something like, I hope its Battle Cry sounds good because we're going to hear it a lot. I said the same thing about Town Crier, and neither of the cards I've said that about have worked out.
Oh.
Yeah, so that's the death sentence. But anyway, yeah, so Rush ended up not really being all that impactful. You wanted to maybe discuss why, and along with some of the impact of some of these other mechanics and which ones really fell flat. Because I think 3 of the 4 that we mentioned have not had a huge impact.
No, they have not. Which, it's not necessarily a problem or a bad thing, absolutely. It is nice when the new things they introduce get used, though.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, so let's start with Rush, because this one I think was pretty temperate in that there are definitely Rush cards that see play and they're good.
Yeah.
There's not a whole lot of them.
Yeah, Vicious Scalehide has been showing up in Quest Rogue. I think it also was being used in Even Paladin a bit, but I think they moved away from that.
Yeah, it's kind of fallen out of favor. Like decks run, 0 to 1 of them now.
And that's 2-mana 1/3 Lifesteal Rush. So that's really good in Quest Rogue because it'll become a 5/5, and you can recover really from any situation with a 5/5 Lifesteal Rush that you can make copies of. You're gonna get all your health back real fast.
Yeah, that was huge. I totally underestimated that card in Quest Rogue. I was like, oh, that's cute. It's another card that attacks the turn it comes out. That's good with the quest. But then, after playing the new version of the Quest Rogue, it's really that catch-up mechanic that's the huge deal. It improves your aggro matchup so much. So much. Because the problem with Quest Rogue, it used to just be you do all your stuff. You're like, haha, I got my quest done. And the aggro deck's okay, kill. They're like, all right, I'll just kill you. And then, we'll move on and play the next game. Yeah, just the Hunter Hero Power. GG. Right. You're just like, I'm making 5/5s and I'm at 3 health, and then it's over. So Vicious Scalehide is a nice way to be able to leverage your life total in the early part of the game, and then get a lot of it back later. Yeah, but ultimately, just as a card that isn't a 5/5, it's largely too unimpactful, and that is where I think a lot of these minions fall. And one that's really sort of guilty of that is Red Band Wasp, which is another 2-mana 1/3 rush, which has it has a mechanic which used to be keyworded called Enrage. While it has all its damage, it has 3 extra attack. So it can become, if you play as a 2-mana 1/3 and kill a 1/1, you'll wind up with a 4/2, which is kind of neat. But that killing a 1/1 is not very valuable. What Red Band Wasp does is not very impactful. Killing a 1/1 or a 2/1 isn't that big a deal, and if you're doing it early, that 4/2 is very fragile. Getting a 4/2 off Big Game Hunter and doing it late game is a different story than getting that 4/2 to just get killed immediately. That's true. And it doesn't really trade with anything. You could use a Cruel Taskmaster or something to pump it, but now you're using 2 cards. And you're not getting value out of it anymore. So even though it looked good, when it comes down, it's a 1/3, and 1/3s are not good. 1/3s, they got to be like Netherspite Historian or something. Yeah, they got to cost 1 mana. Yeah, then I'm in. I'm ready for. You got my attention now. Yeah, I mean, one mana 1/3s are historically insane, but the 2 mana 1/3s are historically not. Yeah, I agree with you. Red Band Wasp is That's interesting. That is a card that I thought would be a lot better. It did look like, oh, maybe it's a little bit slow, and when you think about taking an arena, it's like, oh, okay, it's good. But like Vicious Scalehide, it ends up just being a little bit too weak. One thing it is good at is trading with Odd Paladin's minions. Yeah, that's true. But that deck really fell out of favor after the early portions of the Witchwood metagame, which is, I think, part of the reason why Vicious Scalehide saw play and then stopped seeing play. That makes sense. That's my pet theory about it, at least. And I think Red Band Wasp would have been a little better, suited against that kind of deck, which may actually become more common now that, even Paladin is getting the hose.
Yeah, I expect Odd Paladin to become the flavor of the month again, at least for Paladins.
Yeah. Murloc Paladin's also apparently a deck. I actually just really don't see it that much on the ladder.
Me neither, though I have played it and it seems at least as strong as even an Odd have been, so I could also see that being strong and not getting played still.
Yep, yeah, well, we will see. So I think probably the best rush minion is Scaleworm, maybe, or Druid of the Scythe.
Yeah, see, so Druid of the Scythe getting play is kind of cool, and I think that's like an example of rush succeeding, because it's fun to have a minion that can have that impact immediately and fight immediately. It feels different from removal because their taunt minions will be relevant, and also if you have buff effects, you can use them on your rush minion. So you can like play a Druid of the Scythe and Fungalmancer, which is that's a good time. But that became especially necessary in the deck that had to have this deck building constraint of not playing spells. So now I have to take all my removal out. What am I going to replace it with? Oh, I can use this rush minion.
Yeah, that's definitely one of the things that I think we thought rush would be good for when we were reading about, and I think that's definitely true. Like Druid of the Scythe is basically a removal spell.
Yeah, and it was necessary because of the deck building constraint. It couldn't use Wrath, so it had to use something, and this is here. So that is definitely a successful one. One of few, but still.
Yeah, it's nice because it occupies this interesting design space. When you just for some reason do not have access to these other spells, or you don't want those other spells in your deck, then Druid of the Scythe can play that role. But or if it's not good as a removal spell, you can play it as a taunt. Even though I think you probably just keep it in your hand at that point.
Yeah, unless there's like a giant that's going to kill you.
Yeah, Scaleworm sort of occupies a similar space in that. This is 4 mana 4/4. If you're holding a dragon, it gets +1 attack and rush. It becomes a 5/4 with rush for 4. That's really chunky. That can even survive its attack usually. Completely massacres Tar Creeper.
Yeah, this is one of the ones that actually does give you enough value and you get enough out of playing it. You don't wind up with... You don't either trade 1 for 1 or get this terrible minion. You can actually get a big minion and also kill something reasonable. Darius Crowley does that too.
Yes.
That's another one that actually was seeing in the few warrior control decks that were being used. This has actually been showing up.
Yeah, that's a card that I sort of had underrated pretty severely, but ended up being really good. Or at least good enough to see play in some of its decks. But yeah, I think the warrior class in general has just not had strong enough decks to have too much of a metagame impact.
Yeah, that might be changing in a few hours, which is very exciting.
Yeah, I really hope so. I would love to see... I think Warrior has a bunch of really cool tools right now, and they have access to a bunch of archetypes, and I'd like to see them refined, and see them refined because I think their base level power is too low.
But now other cards their base power levels being brought down, so maybe it can be a fair fight for once.
Right, and that's a really good thing. So I mean...
Another one that looked good was Militia Commander, right? Like, at first, that looks like a really good card, but the minion that you wind up with is going to be like a 2/2 or a 2/1. Like, you just don't get quite enough out of it.
Yeah, I still think Militia Commander is not a terrible card, but you definitely make an excellent point that the minion that you're left with is like pretty small. That makes the card a lot worse because then it's a little bit more like a conditional removal spell that gives you like a body. But Jade Lightning sees play.
Yeah, it's definitely not completely useless, but it's deceptive in that it looks like you might wind up with a nice minion, but that really never happens.
It's true. And I mean, in general, I think I thought that the Warrior Rush cards would just be better because of a card like Towncrier, which I still think is just an insane card.
Yeah, for sure.
So, it's a little surprising to see. It's a little surprising to see some of these fail. I mean, another really big one that I was rating pretty highly was Muck Hunter. But I mean, because it's just the stats are huge. It's a huge minion for 5 mana. I mean, a 5/8, geez. But I guess just giving your opponent minions is really just too much. Like those cards have kind of never been good.
Yeah, it's got like a lot of natural weaknesses, and there's all these, like, if they're not playing aggro and really stoked to get 2/1s, they probably have a Void Lord, and now you can't actually properly take care of them anyway.
Right.
So it's just like been really awkward in this meta. One of the minions that I mentioned was actually pretty strong, which also saw play, was Rabid Worgen. I think that's one of the better rush minions.
Oh, the 3/3, yeah. Yeah, I think that one's good. I actually, my pick 2 deck was Town Crier and Rabid Worgen.
That's hilarious.
It was fun. It worked well. I mean, there's, it was really fair, but there was some strategies that were just too greedy, and this would beat them.
That's awesome.
Yeah. Also, I had Warrior Quest, so I just needed to pick something.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Tom Crier. Yeah, but like if you look at the other ones, like Swift Messenger, which is either 6/2 or 2/6, Gilnean Royal Guard, which is either an 8/3 or a 3/8 Divine Shield for 8. Both of them have rush. Like, if you play them and then you attack something, like, you just don't have a big minion left over. Like, the 8/3 is appealing, but even that, like, it won't have Divine Shield anymore. Paying 8 mana for an 8/3 without Divine Shield, like, you get to kill their minion, but a lot of them, just the thing you wind up with is not big enough.
Yeah, and also, it's not like calling these removal spells is a shortcut, right? Because they get screwed up by Taunt, and Taunt is really, really, really common. Now that is a mechanic that's highly impactful in Hearthstone.
Yes.
Pretty much every deck runs, like, except for Rogue, it runs some like Taunt minion. And I think even these days, the Rogue decks probably have a Tar Creeper or something in there. But
Quest is Wax Elemental.
That is true. That is a Taunt minion. But
tiny one.
Very, very little.
But he still counts.
Till it becomes a big boy. Yeah, but like Rush, gets walled off by Taunt. That's one reason why Scalehide looks so good, is because one of the most common Taunt minions, I think probably in the game, is Tar Creeper, and Scalehide just very elegantly deals with it.
Scaleworm.
Scaleworm, yeah, not Scalehide. Scalehide's the 1/3.
Scalehide does not work very well against Tar Creeper.
No, you slam your Scalehide into the Tar Creeper, and they're pretty stoked about it.
Unless you also play Blessing Kings.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, that card is good.
That's where I have some hope for Rush, that some of these cards might become more relevant if they print some spicy buff spells. Because the Rush minions become, like, better than removal if you can augment them properly. Like, I was thinking about Get in there and fight, maggot, and Abusive Sergeant, and if that were still a 2/1, I think Rush would just be better.
Oh, sure, yeah.
You'd be more frequently giving your minions this to attack. So I think, I'm hoping that one of the ways we might get to see more of these being played is with new buff cards in the coming sets.
Yeah, that would be really cool. So it's kind of weird. I mean, Abusive Sergeant sees at least fringe play in its current form, but yeah, it kind of didn't. It really, really fell off when they changed it from 2 attack to 1 attack.
Yeah.
So.
Not nearly as many maggots getting in there and fighting nowadays.
Certainly not.
Hunting Mastiff. See, that card is another rush that's a 2 mana, 2/1 Echo Rush. It actually has both of the new keyworded mechanics from Witchwood. No wonder they spoiled it so early. I didn't even notice that. And it's pretty good because it's like a removal spell that scales. It's similar to Forbidden Flame.
Oh, sure, yeah.
But you get to divide it up, which and some Magic cards let you do, like, I'll deal 2 here, 3 here, 4 there. Those are really strong cards, really strong effects. So Hunting Mastiff, like, in Arena, I think that card's probably unreal. But it just, Hunter decks never really want to do that. Like, Hunter decks are almost always trying to go face, and just having an efficient card advantage removal spell is not really their shtick.
So there's another, so yeah, it can generate, like, it's a good catch-up card, right? If they have a board where, if they're beating you on board, you can play Hunting Mastiff and, kill a lot of stuff. But one tricky part about this card, and actually this is sort of generally a problem with Echo, is you're really so these cards are really balanced around you spending all your mana on these cards, but with removal spell, you often don't want to spend your entire turn just killing one of their minions. You want to kill something and develop. So Hunting Mastiff, like you can actually just develop, some 2/1s, which is more than nothing, but it's not that much more than nothing.
Yeah, it is nice that, if they have a 4/4 and 6 mana, you can kill their 4/4 and make a 2/1, right? But, I mean, like, a hunter isn't gonna win with that as their strategy.
Yeah. If you have an empty board and your opponent's on 6 and they just play, like, Hunting Mastiff 3 times, they didn't really do much. So.
The Spellstone and Savannah Highmane, that's what you should be doing with 6 mana.
Right. So it's actually ends up being kind of weak, outside of some very specific situations. And even in those situations, like, what you want is something more powerful.
Yeah, it's like, it would be a good card in a different class.
Potentially, yeah. Yeah, I mean, Hunter in particular is pretty proactive, so in a class that was more reactive, a card like this would be nice.
Like in, Priest or Warlock, this would actually be pretty spicy.
Yeah. So, do you want to move on to Echo, now that we've sort of, we have a nice little segue here with Hunting Mastiff?
Oh yeah, this is perfect. So the other keyworded mechanic, in addition to Rush, is Echo, which we already kind of talked about a problem with it. Something we don't like about it is that you're pretty much always supposed to be spending all your mana on it.
Yeah, and that's you're at least encouraged to, because that's the way you get the most value out of the cards, and but more importantly, even if it's not optimal to do that, which I guess often it won't be, they're balanced around you being able to do that. So the cards have to be a little bit weaker in order to facilitate the fact that you could just spend every resource you have on a given turn on these cards. So I think that's a little bit of a problem. From a design perspective with these cards, I think that they ended up being just too weak. I think, of the Echo cards, I'm looking at a list here. The ones that I've actually seen in games, enough to mention, would be Warpath, Face Collector, Phantom Militia.
Mm-hmm.
And not really any of the other ones. Maybe Hunting Mastiff.
Yeah, I certainly haven't seen any of them.
Yeah.
Any of the other ones.
I think it's it's rough. I actually have seen Squashling, but I don't remember if that was an arena game or not. So
yeah, that's one of the better ones, I think.
Yeah, I think he's just sort of missing a deck, but I also think Squashling is pretty good still.
But yeah, a lot of them, if you're just playing it on turn 2, it's wow, you're gonna lose that game. That does, your opponent is doing stuff, and your cheap shot is 2 mana for something in Rogue, for 2 damage to a minion that you could do for 0 mana.
Right.
Ghostlight Angler is a 2 mana 2/2. Turn 2 playing a 2 mana 2/2. You're putting yourself behind.
For sure, yeah. That's another, one of the big issues with these things is they tend to be really below rate. I mean, Ghostlight Angler is 2 mana 2/2. That is below rate. This is basically a vanilla card with Echo. So we can think of this as they're showing us what they think Echo is worth here, and it's worth 1 to 2 stat points, or it's worth trinket text and a toughness to them, which is pretty substantial,
Yeah, I mean, the cards that are getting played are, there's Amani Berserker showing up right now.
Right. Yeah, so it's pretty tough. Actually, it's pretty funny when you look at Squashling and Hunting Mastiff side by side. In a way, I guess Squashling is the version of Hunting Mastiff that ends up in Priest, but
yeah,
it's just funny, Squashling doesn't function as a removal spell. Not that Mastiff is a particularly amazing one, but if you have to just play them and not do anything with them, obviously you prefer Squashling.
Yeah.
So I think that some of the most impactful Echo cards have been Warpath and Phantom Militia in the Warrior class, but that class is just not seeing play.
Yeah, that's definitely part of the reason why it seems like Echo isn't doing as much, is because the other cards that are going with Warpath are not that good, or haven't been good enough. But the times I was playing Dead Man's Hand Warrior and I had Warpath, the card's really good.
Oh yeah, it seems awesome. I mean, because that's a deck that doesn't mind just clearing the board and hero powering. It doesn't need to play a minion.
Yeah, and the flexibility on it is also super good. It's really good that you can invest 2 or 4 or 6 or 8 or 10, and all of those are options at different times is really great versus pretty much all the other ones. Like you said, you just always want to play it as many times as possible. Warpath is one of the ones where, like, if you only need to use it 3 times, it's going to be better because then you can play something else that turn.
Yeah, for sure.
So that one actually, the other ones really don't feel flexible. It feels like you have to wait till you have at least 6 mana and then spend all your mana on it. And Warpath, on the other hand, actually feels like you have some play to it. How many times you'd want to cast it.
Yeah. That's nice.
So that's a hit. They definitely nailed it with that one.
I feel like they did too. But yeah, I guess a lot of the ones that are minions and leave behind permanent effects and are not, like reactive effects, you're sort of encouraged to just play all of them. You're just encouraged to use all your mana on them, and I think that that's an issue.
Yeah. It's definitely cute how Phantom Militia works with the quest, though. I think that's really why it was getting played.
Oh yeah, for sure. It's not really seeing play outside of decks that want to just trigger the warrior quest. But I think it's cool that they gave that deck another option, because it's not like, that was potentially an issue with that deck. I remember I played it a bunch when it first came out, and it always felt like I had no cards in my hand.
Mm-hmm.
Phantom Militia can help that a little bit.
It's a huge help for that deck. Yeah,
I think so too. Face Collector is another interesting one. So I've seen this in some like tempo style rogue decks. It's 3 mana 2/2 Echo, add a random with Battlecry, add a random legendary minion to your hand. It's like okay. I mean, 3 mana 2/2 is not particularly good, and it's 6 mana for 2 2/2s is pretty bad, but getting cards back in your hand is nice, especially for like tempo rogue decks, which have so much removal in them that they can kind of win with anything.
Yeah, just as long as you have bodies to throw at your opponent, you can get through, and also since they're random, they're hard for your opponent to predict.
Yeah, for sure. But, it's still not really an amazing card. Has not made splashes, that's for sure.
No, though certainly one of the things about it that makes it more appealing is Shadow Step. Because we were talking about how you want to have as much mana to spend as possible on it. You can play a Face Collector and then Shadow Step it, so it'll cost 2 less next time.
That's true.
That might allow you to get more, you might be able to play it more times that turn because of Shadow Step. So I think that must be another reason why it was in a deck that already played Shadow Step.
Yeah, but it's still not totally what a tempo deck kind of wants. It's pretty tempo negative, and I think it works just in Rogue because of the nature of some of their cheap class cards and like Vile Spine and stuff like that. But so it's not huge impact. Probably an optional card, if it's even optimal to play it at all.
I mean, Echo's definitely really cool.
Yes.
There have been times where my opponent did something much more interesting than I expected, like using the Summoning Portal combos with like Linda Crowskin or just even with Phantom Militia. That's really cool. Or using, a minion that makes your spells cost 1 less and playing, I guess there's actually no normal way to do that, but you can wind up getting cards to play an Echo card a bunch more times if your spells cost less. It's just a lot of them are way too weak. One thing is that you would think that this would be the perfect effect for Quest Rogue, right?
Oh, sure.
They're playing the same minion over and over again, and this Face Collector's right here giving you more, but it's still not good enough.
Yeah, I mean, Face Collector costs way too much for a deck like Quest Rogue, and I think so that's actually a good segue. I think potentially the problem with Echo is design space. It might be that the kinds of effects that you want people to have access to a bunch of times in a turn, so first of all, the cards have to be cheap, because if they cost 6 or more, then Echo keyword might be on the card.
LOL.
But also, even if they cost 5, that means that in order for the Echo card to be, efficacious, the player has to have 10 mana. And they also need to be able to spend 10 mana playing whatever the Echo card is. Like a 5/5 or something, and that would be like, that's not a good 10 mana play, 2 5/5s.
Yeah.
These cards inherently have to be inexpensive. However, their effects can't be something that would be like really ridiculous if it were to happen a bunch of times in a turn. So
yeah.
And this includes just getting like a reasonably statted minion. Even so, like the thing that is like closest to the vanilla test here is Walnut Sprite at 3 mana 3/3 with Echo. In order to get any value out of that, you need to spend 6 whole mana on it. And if you're just getting 2 3/3s for 6 mana, that's below rate. If you're getting 3 3/3s for 9 mana, that's below rate. So it's like you end up with. I think that this effect just has really limited design space. Also, you can't really put it in Rogue because of Quest. Like that's why I brought that up. Is that the reason Face Collector is the best they could do for Rogue, even though that's the class that would love this effect the most, aside from maybe Warrior, but they gave Warrior Phantom Militia, which is fine. But they would love like a 2 mana card with Echo. That would be amazing for that deck, because it would just be one card that they could play twice and then Shadow Step or something like that. But they just do that because that would make their Quest a problem. So I think they just painted themselves into a corner here, and they printed, they came up with this really cool effect, and it just had a very limited design space.
Yeah, even if there was a 2 mana neutral minion, like that would be dangerous with Quest Rogue. But
yeah, potentially
2 mana neutral minion with Echo, but there aren't any.
Yeah. So that's that. The existence of this is another reason why I think they should have just outright killed the Quest. It's causing them design problems clearly.
It limits Echo in a pretty obvious way.
Yeah, and so here we have an example of something that was really just a mechanic that was potentially really cool, and a big part of the available cards they could print are sort of, gone because of it. But, yeah, so that's a really good point about neutrals. I hadn't even considered that. That's, obviously a way bigger deal than just rogue class cards.
Yeah, and I hadn't even noticed, but, a lot of them I think still do have some potential, like Squashling, that I think was seeing play in some of the Dragon Priest decks, so that might show up more. And
yeah,
I'm excited to have some more opportunities to play Warpath.
Yeah, I think Warpath, if controlling warrior decks come into style, which they may, this patch notes are pretty huge here. Then I think we'll see more Warpath. We might see more Phantom Militia. I agree with you. I think Squashling is a good card. I think its biggest problem is that it costs the same as Prince Keleseth.
Ooh, yeah. That's a bummer.
Yeah. But other than that, I mean, if Keleseth didn't exist, I think Squashling would be playable. And that we might even get to determine that in a year or so.
This is true. All right, we'll be back, guys. See you 365.
So do you want to move on to even and odd cards?
Yeah.
So I think that this has been one of the more visible mechanics and perhaps impactful mechanics in Witchwood.
Yeah. There certainly have been cards that had even and odd costs in the past. It's just, it never mattered. There were never effects that actually cared if your entire deck was even or your entire deck was odd, but that was something that they introduced, and you're really not going to want to do either of them unless you have one of the legendaries that affects your hero power at the start of the game, right? There's no point otherwise.
Yeah, right. So wait a minute. I have a totally unrelated question. So non-integers are neither even nor odd, right?
I believe that is correct.
Okay. And what about imaginary integers?
I think that those can be even and odd.
Okay, so all right. So then the cards have to be real costed. But they can't be integers, and that's how you can get non-even or non-odd cards. Yeah,
just like a 2.5 mana card wouldn't work.
It'd be like Unglued.
There's like Fraction Jackson and stuff like that.
Yeah, cards that cost half mana in a old school Magic set. Anyway,
little girl is a half of a white mana for a 1/2.
Very good.
It's brilliant.
So, yeah, I mean, I think that I agree with you. The decks that are playing these the sort of Baku and Gen that reward you heavily for having only even or only odd cards are actually really the only reason, some of the only reasons, not the only reason, some of the only reasons to have those deck building restrictions. They improve your hero power, so the classes that are using these cards are ones that want to utilize the improved hero power, for sure.
Yeah, and I think that already sort of limits the decks that are going to use them.
Oh, definitely, yeah, because, like, for example, you're not going to want to do, like, even rogue.
Yeah, it's just not getting enough. Like, your hero power in a lot of classes is not, like, you're not just there to get value. You know, not every deck is Control Warrior. Certainly, getting an improved hero power and having a long game and getting lots of value out of your hero power is what that deck wants to do. But if you don't want to get a long game where you get a ton of value out of your hero power, you usually don't want to make the sacrifice.
Yeah, I mean, there are some decks that are using it. There are some decks that are using it for a different purpose, like Paladin, I think, is actually one of the biggest users of, in Standard at least, one of the biggest users of the even odd mechanic. And they're not looking for a particularly long game, but they are prepared for it as a result of the hero power.
Yeah, that is really cool. I'm glad that, and there was even, like, Baku Hunter was a thing for a bit, and that surprised me, because, like I was just saying, I would think you would only want to do that if you were planning for a long game, but Hunter proved that otherwise.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's interesting. One of the things that these, like, in a proactive and a fast deck, you often want to use your mana as efficiently as possible. It's like, think of it this way: if the game is 5 turns long and you use all of the mana crystals available to you, and your opponent's playing control deck and they use half of the mana crystals available to you, they are probably not winning that game.
Yeah, they're going to be behind.
They're definitely behind, and the proactive decks want to be ahead of their opponent. So, using mana really efficiently is very helpful. Even an odd card screw up your ability to do that. So if you have a deck with even costed cards only, and you have 3 mana, you're going to have this 1 mana that's weird. And you're not going to know what to do with it. The hero power helps that out. So we can look at the opposite situation. If you're playing a deck of only odd costed cards and you have, a 4 mana turn, this can be really awkward because you can, like, play a 3 mana card and then not hero power and just miss the value on that. You could hero power and then you don't have a 2 mana card to play. But in the odd decks, you have 1 costed cards and you just run a lot of them. And those can always fill in the gaps.
Yeah, especially the 1-drops. Just throw those out there.
Yeah, and in the odd-costed decks, those are the ones with the improved hero power. So those are the decks where you really just want to use your hero power as often as possible because it tends to be, like, as good as a card. So...
Yeah, in the case of Paladin, it is a card, Lost in the Jungle.
Yeah, you're paying 1 more mana, but you're spending 1 fewer card, and that is a trade that I think many people would take.
Yeah, for sure. So the even odd mechanic turned out to not be completely limited to control type strategies, which I was surprised by that. I thought that it was going to really be narrowly shoved in there, but I still think they didn't, like, beyond the legendaries, didn't reward players properly. Like, there's really very few classes that are doing the even odd mechanic at all, and that's because I think very few classes are properly rewarded for doing it.
So I think that there is one class. So there's one class that's really rewarded for doing it. Yeah. So I agree with you. Just to point it out, I think that the best example is even Paladin, and they're like, but the only reason that deck exists is just because of the existing card pool. Like, they have Call to Arms and 2-drops, and, like, that's the deck. And then they just put a bunch of other things that happen to be divisible by 2 in there. And having 1 mana hero power in a proactive deck is good. So there you go. That's your deck. I think that in Wild, there's even Shaman, which is actually properly rewarded. So they get access to the 2 mana 2/3 that does 2 damage as a battle cry.
Yeah, Merc Spark Eel.
Yes.
So in addition to the 2 legendaries, they printed 9 cards, 1 for each class, that either wants your whole deck to be even or whole deck to be odd.
Whoa, there's 1 in each class, really?
I think so.
I have no idea because I'm only aware of, like, 2 of them.
There's the Eel, which helps even. There's a Stag and Druid, which helps odd. But I think about it, I don't think warrior or paladin has anything. There's the moth in
Oh, the Moth and
priest.
Priest, yeah.
Um, but like a lot of these are not. You don't really get very much for doing all
Yeah.
of this work.
So there's fewer than 9. I think it's more like 4 or 5, because I don't think there's anything in Hunter either. I'm looking at the Witchwood spoiler, and I don't see.
Oh, yeah. So there's just like beyond the hero power, there's almost not even any point in limiting your deck this way. I was really hoping there'd be more cards that. There's Black Cat and Mage. I was hoping there'd be more cards that reward you for being all even or all odd, but there's actually very few. And when you think about it, you're never going to have a deck with Gen and Baku in it. Those are completely separate decks. So there's like 2 odd cards and 2 even cards, and that's about it.
Yeah.
Each archetype, and I think all of them are class specific.
Yeah, so that's a little bit of an issue. Yeah, that's true. They don't have any like neutral, and they probably will not print anything like that in the future. In a future set.
Because it's supposed to be like related to like the moon phase thing, which is like a theme of the Witchwood. So since it's like related to the flavor of the set, it doesn't make sense that a completely different set would have the same flavor and that would be appropriate. But maybe they will print some other cards that say if your deck is only even costed or only odd costed.
But I mean even mechanically, because like if you don't have Baku or Gen in a set, it's pretty unlikely that it would barely make sense to have a card that said if you have only even costed cards in your deck, do this. Then again, I guess they could just do it.
It'll be in standard for 2 years.
And that's true, and I think the next set will rotate with Witchwood. So like it's almost just an aesthetic thing. Then at that point, it would be weird to spread it across 2 sets.
Yeah, but like I said, there have been decks with even cards and odd cards all of Hearthstone. So
yeah,
it doesn't have to be strictly a Witchwood thing, but either way, get it like the stag and the moth are just such disappointing rewards. Like getting a bigger taunt minion is not what I want for doing all this work. I want something a lot cooler. So I think if I have a bad thing to say about the even odd mechanic, it's that they just didn't make enough cards and strong enough cards to reward you for it.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, though, one of the decks that sort of showcases this mechanic the best is actually just even Shaman and Wild. Getting access to additional totems is nice. I mean, the deck doesn't have Bloodlust, so they can feel like they do nothing, but it does have Flame Tongue Totem. So, you can take your random 0/2 with Trinket Text and, do something with it. The Spell Damage Totem is still amazing. The 1/1 is fine too. And the Healing Totem is also really good. But the Eel is just insane. So, the Eel is, good enough that you're willing to not play Tunnel Trog.
Yeah, and that's really what it comes down to is just, well, are there enough good even cost cards in this class? Yes, okay, I guess we can do it.
Yeah. But I mean that's so that's a really good point. I mean somebody might then say, well, why aren't we seeing even Shaman standard? Let's think about some of the cards that this deck is playing in Wild. It's playing Totem Golem, it's playing Jade Claws, Maelstrom Portal, Crackle, Flame Wreath Faceless. None of these cards are standard legal, and that's 10 of the cards in the deck.
Yep. Like the 10 best cards.
Yes, yeah, those are, that includes all of their best 2-drops. This deck is you're mulliganing your totems in this deck, your Flame Tongue totems. I mean, you're not keeping those in every hand just because you want Jade Claws and Totem Golem. The best cards in that deck are not available for standard play, so there's just nothing to support that deck in standard at all. So even, the Eel is good, but it's not good enough to carry 28 terrible cards.
Yeah, because the other thing you get is the hero power, but that's, once again, just not enough of a reward in Shaman. And another huge problem with it, with the even odd thing, is if you are trying to play this deck that is using Baku to get more value out of its hero power, you're almost definitely going to want to play the Death Knight. And then you lose your improved hero power.
Oh yeah, that's true.
That's one of when I tried to think, well, why don't I play Odd Druid, and I'll have the improved hero power, but then the whole game I'll just want Malfurion the Pestilent, And then once I do that, though, I may as well be playing even cards. Same thing with Jaina. Improved hero power is really interesting, dealing 2 damage for 2 mana and just controlling the board. But your plan is to play Frostitch Jaina and lose that.
Yeah, it's weird.
So I think it's another reason why Baku and going odd and making that commitment is really unappealing, because it actually doesn't even play out in your favor. And that this is obviously one of the reasons it's been working for Warriors. Warrior doesn't have to make the decision. Their Death Knight costs 8, so they don't get to use it anyway.
Yeah, that's true. That's interesting that they it's interesting that they clash like that. I hadn't even really considered that those the even odd mechanics, Baku and Gen, are sort of mechanically at odds with the Death Knights. That's not something that occurred to me.
It seems like it must have been intentional with Gen with regards to Priest, right? Shadow Reaper Anduin.
Oh yeah, sure.
They don't want it to be too easy for your hero power to cost less, because that was really obnoxious. But it's a shame that kind of ruined it for everyone else.
Yeah.
Gen says your starting hero power costs 1, and I think they have that word starting just because of Shadow Reaper Anduin, and I think it would be a much more useful card if it didn't say starting.
Yeah, but then the game would suck a whole lot more.
Yeah, no, if Shadow Reaper Anduin weren't around.
Yeah.
And other classes got to improve their hero powers. It'd be really fun to play. Oh wait, no, you wouldn't be able to do even Quest Warrior. I was thinking about 1 mana Ragnaros hero power, but the quest costs 1, and 1 is not even.
Yeah, that's a shame. Yeah, and it's actually kind of weird. It checks before it deals your opening hand. That was a question that some people had around the time that Witchwood was coming out. Oh, well, can I run Gen in a deck with Quest, because Quest will always be in my hand.
Ah.
But it checks before the hand is dealt.
That's rude.
It is rude, but probably intentional. So I mean that's weird too. That it's also a little bit at odds with the Quest, since they all cost 1, and it even functions in that sort of non-intuitive way. But I don't know. That seems a little sloppy to me.
Yeah, I mean, you can at least play all the odd, you can always Baku with the Quest.
Yeah, but that's only half of the available mechanics there.
Yeah.
And the improved hero power is not always going to be good in the Quest decks. In I guess actually in Paladin it'd be pretty okay. But actually in Hunter it'd be good too. I don't know. I'm sure it's bad in one of them. I'm just not going to think about all of them.
But yeah, it's really, I love restricted mechanics. It's just, you need to actually, I like the Rogue Quest is definitely a restrictive thing. But you get properly rewarded for it, and that's why I really liked it. It was tough to pull it off, but then when you did it, you got to blow your opponent's face up. And, there have been a few decks that managed to use Gen and Baku, but really very few. And I think it's because you largely don't get the payoff for it.
Yeah, I think it's true. It's kind of a shame. I mean, luckily, as Wild has shown us, in the case of Shaman, these strategies become more powerful as the card pool increases. So, as they print more cards, there will be more cards that are either even or odd. So that will just make these cards better. Because right now, Standard has, the smallest card pool that it can have. So these decks are going to look funky and weird, and it might just be that you have to run Amani Berserker or Raid Leader to make them work.
Yeah, these have definitely room to develop at least, but Gloomstag is still really disappointing.
Yeah,
why not? I could already play a Nesting Rock, and I get to play even cards. So making something and it's so boring is the other thing to me. Merc Eel is at least exciting because of how effective it is early game.
right?
But the Stag is just making your deck all odd is such a commitment, and then it's such an unexciting reward for it. Kind of lame.
It is. So I guess there's maybe one more mechanic that they have.
Yes, there technically is another mechanic, we brought it up before.
It's a werewolf. So these are the cards that switch their attack and toughness in your hand. There's like nothing to say about them. These are just bad.
Yeah, I think that the 6/2/2/6 is like cool and like actually pretty close to being good, but it's just not there.
Yeah, I mean, one of the big problems with this kind of effect is that it limits when. So this is a little bit like Molten Blade or Changeling or the Chameleos or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Changeling. That's a mechanic from Magic. Like these types of cards where, in theory they can be something good and that's cool, but you don't get to control when they are. So you kind of just have to when they offer you something good, you're encouraged to take it because then otherwise it's just going to be dead in your hand, and potentially not be something good later. And then you might end up having to play suboptimally in order to get value out of them. And that's the problem with these. That's the thing with these, especially the rush ones. The rush ones that just the werewolves that are 4/2s or 2/4s or something, and they have rush. You want to use these as removal spells. And the thing about removal is it needs to be timely. So, the Swift Messenger is 6/2, or 2/6. 2/6 is not removing anything. But a 6/2 can crash into something and kill it. Or the Gilnean Royal Guard. 3/8 is not really removing anything either, but we sure will.
Yeah, but then you wind up with an 8/3.
Right.
Yeah, they're kind of like it. It looks like they reduced their stats because they have this effect when it's not even really a benefit. So the stats on these minions probably could be higher and still be totally fair.
Well, it's again, I think it's a design space thing. There's actually the difference between their power and toughness has to be significant for this effect to mean anything. Let's imagine a 3/4 or a 4/3 for 3.
Yeah, I see how that's kind of boring. There's not much of a difference there. But it could have been a 4/8 or I think that's still a pretty big difference. And
that's true.
Yeah, the messenger I think is cute because you can recruit it. There's a lot of things that recruit for 4-drops. So you can get a 2/6 rush and attack immediately, and then you can also use Inner Fire with it. But I mean, it's mostly just a boring effect that is also really annoying. the switching health and power in your hand.
Yeah, I mean, constructed Hearthstone is it's such that sometimes you only have a 1-turn window, and you have your turn where your opponent maybe played off curve or you were able to cheaply remove their stuff, and you need to start to command the board so that you can swing the game. Otherwise, your opponent's going to develop and just become tempo positive. If you have these cards, they're not necessarily going to cooperate with that 1-turn window that you have. And that's been my problem playing them in Arena, just drafting them and giving them a shot. It can just feel like sometimes you want to use your mana, you want to play the card because it costs 4 or whatever, and you have 4 mana. But it's just not the stats you want. You're playing a 6/2 into an empty board, or you're playing a 2/6, and it's just it's not what you want to be doing.
Yeah, it feels really bad when last turn it had the right stats.
Right.
But now this play is terrible. I think it's a neat effect, and it's cool how it works in the set thematically and stuff. So I think fun wise it's and flavor wise it's probably fine. But it can definitely be annoying versus I guess maybe they're there just as contrast to show how great Druid of the Scythe is. That one you get to pick.
Yeah.
3 mana 4/2 rush or 3 mana 2/4. You get to choose which way it is, and that card is seeing play. That's nice.
That one's good. Yeah, that's true. I don't know if I agree on the flavor perspective. Just to make a quick comment, so it occurred to me that I have not read deeply into the lore of Witchwood, so I'm only going off of just the lore that I can garner from mechanics, or the the lore to the effect that the extent that it affects the mechanics. It appears like the even odd thing is actually related to being a werewolf in some way, right? So
yeah.
because Gen is a werewolf. He says we will turn our curse into our strength. Assuming that okay, so being a werewolf has to do with the mana cost of the cards. Okay, and then Baku the Moon Eater, eats the moon, right? So he screws up the werewolves. So that's it seems like in some way werewolves are related to mana cost of cards. But then the Swift Messenger, these sort of werewolf type cards come around. They have nothing to do at all with the even or odd. Actually, wait, no, maybe they do. Are they all even costed?
No, the pumpkin guy is 3 mana.
The pumpkin guy.
There's a 3 mana 2/4 lifesteal that its attack and health switch while it's in your hand.
I see.
I can't remember, and he's like a farmer.
Does he? Oh yeah, and he becomes a werewolf. Like his art is some kind of beast.
Pumpkin peasant.
Pumpkin peasant. Yeah. Okay. All right. No, damn it. I was. If that came together and they were all even costed, I would have just rescinded my criticism. But alas, my criticism stands.
I see what you're saying. It's a little bit like all over the place, I guess.
It's a flavor loss, yeah.
But yeah, it's definitely like kind of Hearthstone-ish.
Yeah, I'll take it. Inconsistent.
Consistently inconsistent.
Yeah, I mean, these are minor criticisms. I think that just mechanically, this was not, this and Echo were sort of maybe just too restrictive, which is the thing, actually. If you want an interesting discussion on mechanics and how to think about them, again, I'm going to refer to Mark Rosewater. You should look up the Storm Scale. Are you familiar with the Storm Scale, Evan?
No.
Oh, it's so cool. So, the Storm Scale is on 1 to 10, where 1 is an evergreen ability like Flying or Trample, and 10 is Storm. How likely are they to reprint this mechanic?
Okay, it's a scale of 1 to 10.
Yeah, scale 1 to 10. And it's called the Storm Scale, of course, because Storm is the most broken mechanic in Magic, and that is 10. So they, and he, I think, has rated, Mark Rosewater has rated every mechanic up until at least, some point, up until maybe 2 years ago, on this scale, and discusses the cards in terms of the design space that they give the designers, like how many cards can we print with this effect, in terms of the player reception, in terms of the rules complexity and all that stuff. So if you want to, it's a good way to like think about mechanics from a designer's perspective, where the design space, which is the space of possible cards that can have this type of mechanic, where that is something that they have to consider a lot, that players don't ever have to consider.
Yeah, and I feel like if they had made all the werewolves all even or all odd, that would have been limiting on their design space.
It's true. Yeah. Oh yeah, of course.
I think that playing it loose with werewolf, sometimes being a werewolf means it's about your casting costs, sometimes it's about your health and your power, and other times maybe it's about other stuff. But it's always the duality part is maintained. I think that they did that because it gave them more options.
Yeah, no, I think that's true. It makes sense, but unfortunately, the mechanic is just not good enough.
Yeah, that one is not even tough to feel bad about. It was never meant to go anywhere.
No, I never thought that would be good.
Pure silliness.
A reasonable place to wrap up.
Yeah.
All right.
I'm excited for the upcoming changes.
Same here. Yeah, I guess we'll be talking about that. So yeah, that'll be fun. I'm hoping we can get the next episode out in a pretty timely manner, but yeah, we can talk about that later. So, certainly more timely than our speculation episode. That was entirely my fault, though.
That was hilarious. I think people still liked it, so I'm not worried.
Yeah, I'm sure it was still okay. So anyway, if you want to find more of our content, you can find us on Twitter, twitter.com/lastturnhs. You can go, I should just lead with our website. You can go to lastturnhs.com, and it has links to all of our stuff. Or you can go to Twitter, or you can go to facebook.com/lastturnhs and follow us there. We are on iTunes, Google Play, and some other services as well, like Stitcher. You can also find us on SoundCloud at soundcloud.com/lastturn. That is at present our hosting service, though that may be changing at some unknown point in the future. Yeah, we also have a YouTube channel where we host our podcast stuff And maybe someday we'll even have non-podcast stuff there too.
That'd be exciting. Like some matches with Hearthstone cards.
That'd be fun.
That could be. I would play Hearthstone.
I'd play that game once or twice. Yeah,
I could be convinced to play a round of the old Hearthstone.
Yeah, I mean, this is a Heroes of the Storm podcast, but we're happy. It's another Blizzard game, so we're happy to give it a shot.
We'll break out, maybe play some Call of Duty or whatever's in the
Black Ops 4, which is now in the Blizzard launcher. I think my hypothesis about that is that they perceive that adding Destiny 2 to the Blizzard launcher gave them sales, which I guess they could measure from the source of, how people are playing this game primarily. And so they wanted, Activision was like, wait, we can make money because people trust Blizzard, so let's sell the Blizzard people.
You just put it over here, people are going to click on it. I'm telling you.
It's true. That's actually very little to do with Hearthstone, but there's not a lot of DRM game platforms that you want to have on your computer. Steam is the one that everyone has, and of course anyone listening to this podcast has Battle.net, but you guys might not have the Epic Games Launcher or Origin or any of those things, because why would you want that? You want everything it's either going to be in Steam or it's going to be in Battle.net, so I think that Activision probably caught on to that.
They're smart. They made some good decisions.
They certainly have. They make a lot of money. I guess that's it for us. You can catch us. We'll catch you guys next turn.
See you next turn, everybody.